So we're there's so much else we could talk about in between, but the Imitation Game, which is obviously has received its premiere already and will be opening in a few weeks here. Now, there you've got the challenge of you've got to, it's wartime Britain, wartime London, and then you've got Bletchley Park. So the whole idea of this being this code-breaking centre and all the things associated with it. And, of course, also you have to build Alan Turing's great machine, which is more than a machine, isn't it?
Well, this film was actually remarkably easy to research because Bletchley Park exists as a museum and it has fantastic archives, lots of visual material that we could look at. And so that was relatively straightforward. In a funny kind of way, what was, as I said earlier on, the notion of how to achieve the site was also quite obvious. The route we should take was quite obvious. I mean, the sort of, I suppose this is a period we've seen so much of. That was the tricky thing, is to find something. It's to find a life to the machine. It's to find a life to that period, which is not quite that sort of brown and ochre world that you're used to seeing for this period. And when I started, there was an exhibition of Turing at Bletchley Park at the Science Museum, and there was just one drawing that he had done, which was part of his studies. It's too complicated to begin to explain because the mind of this guy is so extraordinary. Studies of he was obsessed. His studies were about morphogenesis, which is the nature creating its own patterns, whether it's a leopard's spots or a zebra's stripes or the whorls of a snail or whatever. And that's what he was studying in Manchester after the war. And there, in this exhibition, they had a lot of his own drawings. And that suddenly became a key. And there was this one little drawing on a notebook piece of paper, which is a red ring and a black blob and some annotated figures. And that had such a strong graphic sense that immediately when I saw that, I kind of thought that's the thing I'm going to hook everything on. Suddenly the red became a very important colour. Suddenly that graphic element, he's surrounded by these images. So the images you see at the beginning of the film are all Andrew Hodges, who's his very, very, very erudite biographer, came to the art department, and he was so pleased that we were actually really thorough in our research and that everything that you see hanging on the walls of Turing's house is absolutely what he would have had in that period of his life. So that was very nice because my enthusiasm was, I won't pretend, it was a very aesthetic one, and it's suddenly this will work, this really punchy red, these very graphic elements, this will look good. He was coming at it from a completely academic background, and he was as enthusiastic as I was, so that sort of validated those decisions.
And I think in the clip that we're about to see, we're going to see that this is where the code-breaking team, I mean, there's obviously a lot of high drama and tension in there, but the code-breaking team, we're going to see them, and we are going to have a glimpse of the machine.
Well, the machine was, we had to create that because, I mean, Bletchley, who was so helpful, the Enigma machine that you see in the film is a real Enigma machine. What we had to do with the rest of the technology was actually, I mean, for example, there's a scene where you've got 30 wrens listening at radios, and clearly Bletchley don't have 30 period correct radios, so the prop buyer was valiant in finding these sort of radio obsessives who, we had radios and headsets coming from every side of the corner. She was advertising in these publications that you'd never know existed, and these machines were coming from everywhere. But then the actual bomb, which was the thing that Turing created that cracked the Enigma code, at Bletchley they have a replica. And Morton and I went on our first trip and we looked at it and we slightly looked at each other and went, it's not that interesting. So we had to sort of take, so our challenge was to try to make that machine, and what was interesting was the workings of it. It sits inside this sort of Baker-like box, which just wasn't huge, so we just made a decision not to have it in its box and to expand it and open it and have all its workings. And then, again, money always comes into it, and we couldn't afford to have prop makers. There are lots of cogs and wheels that actually dials that move, so we obviously had to get them made by prop makers. But the rest of it, we ended up having to do within the art department, and we have one art director who's a particularly good model maker, and he was taken off the drawing board and sent downstairs with the same prop buyer who found all these fantastic components, which were from the 40s. And Marco and a whole team of interns were sent down with cables and wires, and they literally model made this thing.